What promises to be another busy week of confrontation and controversy at the White House began today with new presidential attacks on the Russia collusion probe and more damage control from presidential lawyer and recent legal spokesman Rudy Giuliani. Correspondent Kevin Cork starts us off tonight with a bevy of topics from the North Lawn. Good evening, Kevin.
Evening, my friend. Plenty to talk about. Now, on a day that saw the First Lady unveil her Be Best platform, the president, frankly, Brett, tried to take a back seat, though he had sit in the front row at the Rose Garden. Still, it was an early morning tweet storm by the commander-in-chief that once again managed to steal the day's spotlight.
Let us teach our children the difference between right and wrong, and encourage them to be best in their individual paths in life.
A rarity at the White House today, as First Lady Melania Trump, not her husband, took center stage, rolling out her Be Best anti-bullying campaign, an effort which drew words of encouragement from the president.
Melania, your care and compassion for our nation's children, and I have to say this, and I say it to you all the time, inspires us all.
But while the president took second billing in the Rose Garden, an early morning tweet storm kept his opinion about the ongoing Russia probe front and center, again calling it a witch hunt, writing about 13 so-called angry Democrats, adding, "Just wait till the courts get to see your unrevealed conflicts of interest." That likely a reference to the fact that more than a dozen members of the Mueller team have donated almost exclusively to Democratic candidates, including to the Hillary Clinton campaign. That according to Federal Election Commission records.
It kind of gives the American people a glimpse of what we have to deal with day in and day out with the abuses, not so much of Bob Mueller, but of the people that work for him. I mean, they're way over the top.
Just how the White House proceeds with the probe, including questions about whether or not the president would comply with a potential subpoena from Bob Mueller, is one that outside counsel like Giuliani would have to consider. But over the weekend, the former New York City mayor was absolutely defiant in his assessment of the president's right to do so or not.
We all know if you write a negative story about Fusion GPS, you never hear from Glenn Simpson again. So I think reporters should consider their sources and also report on their sources. If their sources, for example, Glenn Simpson and Dan Jones, are still working with Russians to try to confirm the unconfirmable.
Well, so that's Michael Caputo, former campaign advisor for the Trump team, accusing the media of ignoring facts in favor of staying on Glenn Simpson's good side. Michael Caputo is here to explain the case he was making yesterday. How you doing, Michael? Good morning to you. And wow, you're in the middle of all this right now. You're making a case that reporters will not report on Fusion GPS because it will cost them information. What kind of information, Michael?
Well, Dan Jones, who's used to be a Senate Intelligence Committee investigator on the Democrat side, left Congress and started a company called Penn Quarter Group. This group now, according to his testimony, as we read in the House Intelligence Report, he's raised $50 million from about 10 Democratic donors out of California and New York, which narrows it down some, to continue coordinating additional research by Fusion GPS with Christopher Steele, the British spy that the Hillary Clinton campaign hired. And also, by the way, Christopher Steele, as we know, gets all of his information from present and former KGB officers. So we have a Democrat who says he's briefing all the Intelligence Committee Democrat investigators. Also, his former boss, Senator Feinstein, is the Democratic leader of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which has turned their hearings into absolute perjury traps. Wow. So he also says he's briefing the FBI, which he tries to intimate includes the special counsel.
What you're trying to explain is how this thing goes round and round. How are the American people supposed to understand this, do you think, Michael, based on your experience?
Well, you know, I worked in Congress for a while, and then I worked with the media very closely when I ran the House of Representatives Radio and Television Gallery. It took me a little while to figure out this little, two-step that they do. But the reporters work very closely with the left on the Hill and the left in like, for example, in the Obama administration. And these groups are organized and funded by high-dollar Democratic donors. The problem that reporters have is once they get addicted to these regular briefings that they're getting from Fusion GPS, if they write a story about how, for example, Dan Jones is now funding Fusion GPS to work with spies for $50 million, nobody's writing that except for the Federalist, because nobody wants to. If you write a bad story about Glenn Simpson, that, it's like somebody cut off your drugs. So if you want to be involved in the continuing Russia collusion delusion, you can't do anything bad.
But I heard your statement.
I
heard your statement on CNN yesterday that reporters are leaving facts and ethics behind. But I just want to try and figure out what they're not reporting, so that we can get a better embrace of what's happening behind the scenes. And I think all these movements within court and what this judge said last Friday is very interesting. It all needs to be considered so we can understand the context. You, however, have been in the news for a very different reason. You were interviewed by Mueller's team for 3 hours last week. You did a series of interviews. I saw you in every network. And what you laid out, Michael, was how your family's been exposed to what you say is financial ruin. And you make the case that you're not the only one. Now, since you've gone public, have you had any blowback from them? Have you heard from the Mueller team or not?
No, I haven't. But, I'm not in any legal peril. I'm a witness, not a target or a subject. And they know that. And they say they watch me on they told me they watch me on TV, which to me means be really careful what you say. But if they bring me back, it's only really to punish me with more legal fees. And now that the Trump supporters across the country have gone to my GoFundMe pages and been so generous, I'm not afraid of them anymore. And I'll tell you, the worst thing, Bill, is that I'm just the only person out there talking about this. There are another dozen or more people, middle-class families, whose dad or mom has been dragged into this, and they're racking up legal fees, and they're afraid to talk too, because they don't know how they're going to pay for it, and they think if they talk in the media that they're going to be hauled in again and punished with more legal fees. Because if you're not going to be investigated, if you're not going to be indicted, if you're not going to jail, they're going to break you financially, because it's about ruining every single